All right. Welcome to another episode of the Business Conversations. Today, I'm joined by a sales and marketing leader that I've been looking forward to talking to for a while, Kelli Schutrop. Kelli, welcome to the show.
Hi, Garrio. Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to being here.
All right. Well, let's just dive in. During our prep call, we were talking a lot about which areas we could focus specifically around thought leadership. And what we landed on was this idea of leadership teams becoming more visible and more active online. There's a lot of, let's call it gentle encouragement from sales teams, from marketing teams, from customer success teams. And now, as we are in a bit of a war for talent, HR started to apply this request of the leadership team to be more active. So before we dive into the what's, let's take a step back, and I'd love to get your perspective on the why. How did we arrive at this moment where leaders are being asked to show up more?
Sure. That's such a great question. And it's been really interesting to see over the past, 10 plus years how this has evolved. I think everyone was so used to staying behind their computer or physically meeting in person for coffee. Of course, there's always been businesses that have worked out of the same city. And so having more of that virtual connection was a necessity. But it was not as commonly focused through Zoom or Google Meets or whatever platform you use until COVID. And so just a couple of years ago, as we look at the span of time here, it's been really cool to see how you can actually build relationships faster when you have that video connection. And I think people started realizing, wow, I can see someone's authenticity. I can understand who they are. So when you talk about it in a business sense, there's B2B and B2C, right? So whether you're selling to other businesses or you're selling to consumers, it's one thing to have a brand that resonates with your audience, which is critical. And that's just so, so vital to promote what you're promoting and really get the message of your brand across. But that next step is really showing the humanity of who works within your company, because people choose to work with people that they like and think that they understand the challenges they're facing. So I think what has evolved is just this realization that in a sales capacity, in a leadership capacity, even in your own career search, if you put yourself out there online, let's say on LinkedIn or another social platform, people are able to see more of who you are as a personal brand. And that can drive immense opportunity for your business, for networking connections, for career connections in the future. So that's my take on how it's evolved, is just kind of this natural progression of seeing the benefit of someone's authenticity.
Got it. So let's unpack the term authenticity a bit, because you and I both know that there is the right way and there's the wrong way to be quote authentic online. And I think the term gets so overused that it really doesn't have, it's somewhat lost its meaning. So in the context of this conversation of getting leaders off the virtual sidelines, if you will, how should they be thinking about authenticity?
Right. So if a leader decides that they want to become more virtual, the most important piece is that they are the same person virtually that they are in person. Mm-hmm. So if I'm a business leader and I'm sitting down physically in a boardroom over a cup of coffee, on a Zoom call, on a phone call, whatever that might look like, the way that I'm portraying myself, whether it's being insightful or warm, like a lot of the same terms that you could use as a brand. If, some of the marketers that may be listening or people who have branded their own companies, you have to kind of think about what your brand is and what you deliver anytime you physically get in front of someone or virtually get in front of someone. So to me, authenticity is really whether you're hitting the record button or you're posting something on LinkedIn, even if it's a poll, just the way that you are actually forming your sentences can drive who you are as a person, right? Is it warm and welcoming? Is it more informative and structured? And so part of it is just about continuity and making sure that whatever it is you're providing is going to be the same experience for someone, no matter what environment they see you in. As a marketer, it's hard for me not to relate it back to a brand, right? So if you look at a company like Target, if you walk into a store, if you go on their website, no matter how you are experiencing them, you expect the same upbeat, fun tempo, right? That helpful support. If you were to see a commercial for Target and they had a completely like drab and dreary tone and it felt off brand, it would just make you feel like, God, I don't know. I don't like that. I don't know why I don't like that, but I don't like that. And as a leader, if you're looking to become more virtual, it's important to identify those core personal brand standards for yourself so that you can present in that same way.
I like that, personal brand standards.
Yeah, like when you think about a company, you've got brand standards. So I like to think about it as kind of your own thought leadership, personal brand standards. And there's a format that I like to share with people when it comes to building thought leadership and credibility on a platform like LinkedIn. And that's one of those pieces.
Would you mind sharing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're listening and you're like, man, I would just love to be more of a thought leader on LinkedIn, or at least like know what I should say when I consistently post, because I know I probably should. So take the step back. And these are a few questions. One, address the should. Why does it feel important to you? It probably feels important to you, Garrio, like you mentioned, because you're getting maybe some pressure. You might be seeing your other leadership peers doing it. Marketing might be asking you to. The reality is you have unique insight to share with the world. I mean, even if you're a student 1 year out of school, there's a unique insight you can share with the world. Even if you're a student yourself, I know a lot of this audience here is that leadership pool. And so you've got 10, 15, 20, 30 plus years. And so part of it is saying, who can I help? So addressing who is your audience? Ultimately, who are you trying to impress? What is the industry? What are the company types? What are their levels, right? And then what is important to them? So what are the key topics they think about? What are thought leadership trends in your industry? Because this can kind of help break down and distill that, man, I want to be more visible, but I have no idea. I don't know. How do I approach that? So those are some of those questions. And then you can also look at your company's key messages, right? Like, what does your company offer, whether it's your own company or a company you're representing? What is important to them and how does that align to you? Then you can think about really what are some of the influencers in your space doing? And if you hear me say the word influencers and you start thinking celebrities, you do not have to think celebrities. An influencer in your space may be someone with a couple thousand followers on LinkedIn who posts consistently, and people rally behind their posts because they really enjoy what they're saying. So are they competitive to you? Are they not competitive to you? What do they talk about? Actually starting to like formulate out like listing topics that you're starting to see that you are interested in and that you think your audience would be interested in. And then a few more pieces. I like to think about maybe 3 to 5 people who would rally behind your posts on LinkedIn by you first becoming part of what I'd call the hype squad for them. So if you're seeing them post things and what they're sharing is going to resonate with your audience, and let's say it's not competitive to your business, right? So it's not a direct competitor. There's so many great things out there online. How can you rally behind them, right? Like write down their names, click that little bell icon in the upper right profile, or, wherever that ends up as LinkedIn goes through their algorithm changes and all of their user experience changes. Click that, follow them. And then start thinking about what you can do for content that you produce. So, okay, now I know what my audience cares about. I see people in the space. Can I host a fireside chat where it's literally just me hopping on a Zoom call and hitting record with someone that I think has some interesting thoughts? Or what is my company doing, right? Like maybe we wrote a really cool blog. Maybe we're sponsoring a conference. That might look like, what can you reshare that other people are creating? So you don't necessarily have to be the originator of every amazing thought. You can also be the promoter of amazing thoughts that other people are creating. And then thinking through that cadence, even if it's just once or twice a week. I like to encourage people, because it worked really well for me, to create a spreadsheet, to hold yourself accountable and just write down what your post was that week. Not the entire post, but just like in 3 words, this is what it was. And just starting to commit to that cadence. And as we circle back to that thought of a personal brand standards guide, something that's really important is really having your guiding keywords that drive every post. So for me personally, a few years ago, I came up with these words, and it's credible, relatable, and insightful. And that might sound super generic and cheesy, but when you start distilling it, it helps to create this lens of, is this post going to make sense for my audience? Does it display me as credible? Am I sharing things that are helpful to them? Is it relatable? Sometimes it's not touching on business, but it's something that's encouraging. And is it insightful? So can they learn from it? So those are just some of the pieces that I like to think about when starting to build a brand online, and how you can help others. I think if you've got that mindset of how can I help my audience, it's less daunting of why should I be posting? and it will naturally reap some really amazing benefits.
Got it. That's amazing. And again, this idea of a personal brand standard, it sounds so intuitive having heard it, but it's not something that, you can't unhear it. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
And everything I want to double click on that you mentioned that I think is worth highlighting is, a lot of the leaders, especially here in Minnesota, who tend to really proactively reach back, where they went to school, or, young people are really passionate about helping the next generation not make the same mistakes that they did, or they want to share their insights. So a lot of folks volunteer at colleges, a lot of adjunct professors here in town. They make time to meet with young people. It doesn't always have to be about your business or what you're trying to sell. It can be passing on insights as well. So when you mention that, you have X amount of years of experience, who could benefit from that? That really resonated with me. So I just wanted to make sure that we called that out.
Yeah, and on those lines, or along those lines, I should say, there's a gal that I really enjoy following. Her name is Lauren B. Jones. She's famous in the staffing industry, and she does an excellent job of really creating content that supports a variety of people in her space. And so she's kind of created these themes, even if it's like Woman Crush Wednesday, and like she's posting things now that will be, if you're going to a conference and you're seeing everybody in all these epic power suits, how do you approach that in a way that's affordable? Like it's actually like some tangible thoughts. I mean, her company creates tech stacks for staffing firms, global staffing firms. So that is not something that is directly related to her business, but it's something that gives back in a way. And then I think about groups like the Brand Lab, which is, near and dear to Minneapolis. I was actually at Olson right out of school and got to sit in the same office, post my internship for 3 different contracts with John Olson. And he was just an incredible person. If you're not familiar with the Brand Lab, the concept is that there's not historically been much diversity in advertising. And who controls what ends up in advertising? The clients. Well, who guides the clients? The ad agencies. And if you look into the ad agencies, is there much diversity? Historically, no. So John Olson had this passion to say, let's address this challenge and really equip a generation to learn how to get more involved. So the Brand Lab provides internship opportunities for those in high school and in college that are incredible. Like these are like incredible opportunities with some of the largest corporations here in Minneapolis and beyond, some of the biggest ad agencies. And it's oftentimes kids that are in underserved communities or have an element of diversity. So then they're able to get woven into the fabric of what advertisement is, so that it impacts generations to come, but it also opens doors and opportunities for them to know of a career path that may not have ever come across their plate. So all that to say, there are leaders that speak on behalf of the Brand Lab, right? That are giving back to a generation that might not have otherwise seen an opportunity for a career path that is doing a lot of good just overall in our industry. So there's a lot of ways to bring this to life. It doesn't necessarily have to be driven by what sale am I going to make or how am I going to get my next job. It's part of just being the good in the world.
I love that. And I think it's a perfect segue into this next chapter of our conversation. We've nailed the why. I'm sure this episode in particular will be shared, specifically HR folks will be sharing this. I'm actually thinking of a couple of folks already that I think would benefit from hearing this conversation. So I know that it'll be shared, but then the next question that I know comes right after that is, okay, that sounds great. I'm in, this totally makes sense. What should it look like for me? Right. So gave some ideas around the breakdown of, how should you be thinking about these brand standards? So I've done all that work and now I'm sitting down and I'm looking at the blank window on LinkedIn. What happens next? Let's start with, what should I have done before I open up my computer and I'm looking at that on a Monday morning at 7:30 a.m.?
Totally. Yes. So I'm going to give you 3 pieces of advice to make that blank window less scary. Piece 1, keep a running list in your phone of ideas that pop in your head, period. These will not necessarily come to you Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. or whenever you open that window. They just won't. I get that. We'll call it a writer's block. If like you open it up and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I have a million ideas, but is that relevant? Is that applicable? I don't know. So keep that running list. I find that these ideas tend to happen as you're scrolling through a different social platform at 9:30 at night. It might happen if you are at a conference or in a meeting, and factoring it through that lens of your own personal brand standards of, for me, and feel free to take these, is it credible? Is it relatable? Is it insightful? Can this help someone in my audience? Right? Like, is this going to benefit them? So keep that running list, because that will help. Because then once you open that blank window, you just look through. It's like if you're a meal prepper. I've always done meal prep for the last, I don't know, it's going on probably 8 or 9 years. If you've got a running list of recipes that you like, it makes it less daunting on the weekend, and then you're good to go. So that's tip 1. Tip 2 is probably the hardest for me personally to do. It's to set aside time that you know you're going to post. Mm-hmm. So put a 30-minute block twice a week on your calendar. Not to say it's going to take you 30 minutes, but sometimes posts take a while to craft and refine and see what you want it to say. For me, I've gotten to a cadence where I've got my spreadsheet for my own accountability, and I know, do or die, I'm going to post twice a week. So if you go back and you look at my posts, now you know, now you're going to see kind of behind the scenes, the secret sauce, so to speak. Even if it's like Saturday at 5 and I've not posted a second one because other things needed to come as a priority throughout my week in work and in personal life, I'm posting something. And that just helps to like keep your audience engaged and continue supporting them. So that's another one, is just like that accountability piece. And then the third I would say is, as you're scrolling through LinkedIn or whatever social platform, LinkedIn tends to be my platform of choice when it comes to this. Think about what you're seeing through the lens of, how will that help the people that follow me? Right? Like there's a lot of silent scrollers. The last time I heard a stat, it was something like less than 6% of people on LinkedIn actually post on LinkedIn. So for one, it's an incredible time to start being active, because you can get seen much easier and influence quite a bit more. But two, if you're like me or anyone, you probably spend a whole lot more time scrolling and seeing posts than you do posting yourself. And LinkedIn's algorithm changes over the years. Right now, there's actually a heavier emphasis on reposting other people's content, which is really cool. So if you are seeing something, just go ahead and take a quick second, repost, write your 2 sentences of thoughts and share it. And if you pull yourself out of the lens of having it feel like homework, think about when you're looking at that blank screen and you post something, and then you sit and go, oh my gosh, no one liked it. No one interacted with it. You start feeling those weird feelings. If somebody else were to share that, like, it's just kind of like a warm fuzzy, like, okay, yes, like this actually matters to someone. Like, this is going to help them. Great. And part of that, we'll give you a bonus tip. Part of that is starting to hone in on that personal hype squad, right? Like the people that you are supporting and rallying behind. There are elements to any social media algorithm, including LinkedIn's, where if your post is not interacted with in a certain amount of time, the social media platform will deprioritize it, because there's plenty of content out there. You know, there's a lot of people not sharing, but of the people that are sharing, there's content. So it has to decide what you see in your newsfeed. So if a post is not interacted with for quite some time, it's just going to go, I don't think people want to see this compared to that other one that's blown up. So having that community that organically and authentically is curious what you're saying, and it's going to help their audience too, just creates a powerful mechanism for reach for the words that you're sharing that are going to help them.
Got it. I think that is I don't want to call it a fear, but a concern of a lot of leaders. Like, if I'm going to do this and nobody's engaging, what does that mean? And the response that we share is, it's not necessarily the post itself, but you're going to continue to meet people. You're going to continue to connect. You're going to continue to be on panels and so on. And people are going to be looking you up. And when they Google you, LinkedIn is probably one of the first things that's going to show up. So it may not matter today, and it may not be a great post today, but when you make that connection to someone, it will show up in their feed. So, you may.
That's exactly right.
Exactly.
And I think about that too. There are people that I know that have 40,000 followers. And of course, different social media platforms, influencers are defined differently, right? But generally speaking, on LinkedIn, if you've got over 5,000 and you're honed in on a specific topic, there's quite a bit of legwork that's gone into building that network, right? And hopefully it's because you're creating content and building authentic connections. But there are people that I know that have 40,000 or 100,000 that will do a post that only 3 people will interact with. So I take that step back and go, you know what? It's fine. Like there's going to be that. And as long as you have consistency, not every post has to be we'll call it like your rainmaker. Like it kind of takes the pressure off. Like if you're only going to post once a quarter, oh my gosh, the level of pressure you put on that post is insane. But if you're going to post twice a week, as long as it meets your personal brand standards, and I walk through this probably every third post of like, oh, that didn't go anywhere. You know what, though? Those people, the few people that did interact with it, hopefully it's beneficial to them. And I'll hear about it later. People will message me and be like, hey, that thing you posted, or I saw you through XYZ who commented. But to your point, Garrio, it's so true. Like if a prospective employer, if someone you're networking with, prospective client, whatever that person may be, if they go to your LinkedIn, we all see that activity feed. And they can see like, wow, this is cool. Like they've been posting content that's really intriguing. And you can even feature, as LinkedIn's current user experience stands, you can feature posts. So you can kind of control that narrative. It's really your own website that you don't have to pay to host. You get to make it what you want. And so the more that you can pour into it, the more it's going to create opportunities for you, but also benefit others, specifically, within that stream of that audience you're looking to support.
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to throw some scenarios at you. And
Ooh, fun.
What advice would you give this group? Okay. So you mentioned Target. Target has, it has a well-known brand standard, right? And marketers tend to, that I, interact with and meet from Target, tend to have a certain vibe, right? Same thing for the dev team and so on. But if I'm in finance or I'm in mergers and acquisitions and, the marketing team is saying, or I personally feel, you know what, I actually do want to engage and I want to, show up and be a part of that brand, partially because let's say I'm trying to hire someone on my team.
Yes, that's a perfect use case.
What do I do? I'm an attorney. I have, X amount of years of experience, but I am way more comfortable in, redlining a document than I am publicly sharing my area of expertise. What advice would you give to me if I've committed to getting started?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll put 2 precursors in front of it. One is kind of the assumption, have your LinkedIn profile up to date, right? Have a nice cover photo, have a nice profile photo, have a descriptor, have your summary, so that anyone who is going to see your profile knows right away who you are, right? What your background is in a snapshot. The second precursor is think about why you are posting. If you're posting purely because you are a leader in the company and you're being told this is what we're doing, this is an initiative for this year, and really your intent and your driver is to promote your company from, maybe a talent acquisition standpoint, just keep that in the back of your mind. Like, this is why, this is the audience I'm targeting on. Not to say it can't change. It can change in 6 months who your primary audience is. And then I would say, don't assume that just because you're trying to be more active means that you have to put the title on yourself of thought leader and you have to be like hosting a podcast or hosting a fireside chat. What I would encourage you to do is kind of like an initial step, and maybe this is the lane that you get most comfortable in, is what content is relevant to your audience. So if it is for talent acquisition, maybe the content that's most relevant is a culture post that your own company shares. Great. So what I'm going to do if I'm sitting in that spot and I'm, whatever role that doesn't really want to be public, but is, being encouraged to be more public, I'm going to share what the company's posting because somebody's already worked really long and hard on it, and it's going to help obtain my objective as well. Now, if we pivot that and your goal and your audience is more external facing, let's say you're looking to develop business, just think through those lenses, like what would benefit my audience? So in your seat, what are things you pay attention to, right? Maybe you subscribe to 2 or 4 newsletters every single month and you religiously look at them, or you go, God, I'll look at them when I have time. Like, those are the perfect things to go out and follow on LinkedIn. Get the notifications of when those associations or organizations post so that you can reshare those. So that's like a really easy low-hanging fruit, is you do not have to be the one creating the original content. You can be the one resharing it with a couple sentences. I also find that polls are really nice. When polls first got, introduced to LinkedIn, people, I think, went a little bit stir crazy with them and started asking, what's your favorite lunch meat? And I'm not encouraging you to do a poll just for poll's sake, but it's an easy way to say, Chat GPT is new and relevant. Have you heard of it? Have you not? What is that? Like, what's the favorite prompt that you've heard of someone putting in, or whatever that might be? Like, there's ways to engage your audience that don't require hours of brain power. It's just, this is an intriguing thought. And one way you can think about this, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, is if you're in a room of people, or let's say you're at an event and you're in a one-on-one setting, what is a question you might ask someone to prompt conversation? Because more often than not, that would be a really great poll. And that's a low-hanging fruit or a low barrier to entry for someone to interact with your post.
Got it. Okay. All right. Here's the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Your sales team is, again, we're having a really hard time getting a hold of these key accounts that we're trying to break into. We have an accounts-based marketing approach. So we know our target list and we're really trying to get in there, but we need help from the leadership team to spread the word, talk about what we're doing, help us be more visible. Maybe their competition's CEO is starting to be very active and very visible, and your team is coming to you and saying, like, we need your help too. And you say, yes, I am going to show up and be intentional. How do I support the sales team?
Right. And then you sit back and go, oh, shoot, what am I supposed to do now?
what did I commit to?
Yes. That's actually a really great use case, because I think it happens a lot. And especially if you're not in an enterprise level company, maybe you're in a small to medium sized business or quite small business, and that's what's being shared with you. And you've got more of a presence online because of your title or where you've spoken or whatever that might have looked like in the past. I would say, it would be great if you have a marketing team to partner with the marketing team and say, hey, let's tell some stories about what our team is doing that's really cool, that we're really proud of. And, I come out of the staffing industry, the digital marketing industry, now in more of the online learning consultancy space. I understand that sometimes what you're doing for clients is confidential, right? Like you have to be mindful. Sometimes you can't share a company's name, but you might be able to share a scenario. So that's a nice scenario where you can really celebrate what your team is doing, because it's a way that helps them not only feel encouraged, like this could actually have some nice ripple effects in your talent retention strategy if you're calling out some cool things they're doing, but it also gives the ability for prospective clients to go, oh, wow, I didn't know XYZ company did that. Like, that is definitely the challenge I'm having. And sometimes when that post comes from a C-suite leader rather than the boots on the ground sales individual, it feels different. Even if both of them should be sharing that post, it just might be perceived as one is transactional to close a deal and one is more forward charging, being proud of the team. And I think that can be mirrored on both, as long as it's written in a way that kind of gives kudos to the crew doing the work, right? So that's just one way. I would say another way would be finding individuals on your team that are already talking about what's happening. So if you don't have the option to do a whole full robust, like, hey, marketing, we need a new case study, make sure to spin one up so I can reshare it, or whatever that might look like, there are probably a few people on your team that are looking to grow their personal brand and that are already sharing things. Like, my gosh, that would be so heartwarming to them to share it. I'll give you a tangible example here. So I studied public relations and marketing in school, and out of school, I was a part of the internship program at Olson, which is now owned by a larger publicly held firm. But at one time, Olson was one of the largest privately held firms in the Minneapolis area. Really big clients, super fun, about 350 people when I joined. I had a 12-week internship. They called it an O-ternship because branding is everything, people. and it was really interesting. I decided to start a blog personally. I didn't tell anyone about it, but my family and friends, of just like the things that I learned over 12 weeks, because I knew that having it be my first experience out of school, I had done leadership things in school and internships, but this was the first post-grad internship for a prominent brand, and really exciting, a lot of growth opportunity. I didn't want to forget what I learned. So I was about 2 weeks in, and I was approached by the brand manager who said, someone on our leadership team heard about you doing this, and we'd like to reshare it on Olson's blog. Are you okay with that? And I was like, wow, yes, sure. And it was really cool because every week I would write about what I learned, what I wish I had known. And it was like a strong growth and painful process in that internship, those first 3 months of just like not knowing what I didn't know and all those different pieces. And the brand manager would review it just to make sure there wasn't anything in it that couldn't be shared, because there's a lot that you learn, post 3 months out of school, what can and can't be shared. And I just remember the CEO at the time coming up to me and saying, Kelli, I just want to tell you, like, it's really cool to see our company through a different lens and see what you're experiencing and get to share that with the community here. So just thank you for doing that. And it was really cool to me because it gave them more content to share, kind of a peek behind the curtain of what to expect. That I would imagine was part of their talent acquisition strategy for future interns. There's just a lot of cool things for them. But for me, it felt really exciting. And then once my internship ended, I had networked with a lot of the key leaders in the organization just to learn what I wanted to do next. And I was hired on the brand management team by that brand manager and worked with them for multiple contracts on some of those cool pieces. And so I guess all that to say, to tie that example up, is it doesn't always have to come out of your head. It can also be celebrating what someone else on your team is doing.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth pointing out there too, is they gave you an opportunity to elevate your voice, right? Like the organization has a platform and they were able to lend that platform to you. But it also, these programs rotate, right? The next generation of folks aren't starting from zero now, because they could read blog and learn what you learned and come in with a little bit more intention. And that benefits the individual and it also benefits the organization. So that is a use case of what you're outlining that I think sometimes gets overlooked, has a lot of value. So thank you for sharing that. I got one more for you.
Great. Okay.
So there's a lot of excitement and energy around the startup ecosystem here in the Twin Cities.
Yes.
Right? If you are I always like to say, like, a founder that sells, which I personally, as a salesperson or someone who loves the sales profession, I think everybody should be selling and studying the art of being a salesperson. But not everyone is comfortable selling, and you kind of have to if you are that person, that founder in that seat, because you're not at that level yet where you've hired that talent. So you're trying to sell existing customers, right? So you're that key contact. So I'm assuming that you're post Series A, right? You have cash, you have free cash flow, but you're really trying to build those key relationships. And on the opposite side, you're starting to build those relationships with either existing or future capital allocators, right? As a quote unquote brand, what should you be doing?
Yes. Oh, I love this question because it's where every company starts, right? I mean, especially if you're bootstrapped, you're at that point where you're like, I want to do this on my own. Like, let's dive in. I think getting a little bit comfortable with being uncomfortable on camera is important. If you are in that seat, you're probably already facing those situations day in and day out, whether it's in person or virtually. You are pitching yourself and your company. And so one individual that I have seen do a really good job of this is Jennifer Zick from Authentic Brand. Her company is quite substantial in size now, and she does fractional CMO work and beyond, right? So that's their area of focus. And she was owner-led sales for that first season of her company. And some of the things that I saw her do were things like hopping on the camera. I would imagine it's literally as simple as like her laptop camera and just hitting record on a Zoom window or she used. It doesn't even have to be an expensive process. And sitting down and sharing 3 to 5 minutes of something relevant with her audience, right? And then just posting it. She may tag some people. And I'll even say I had a previous role with a company called Parka, which focused on digital marketing for the staffing industry. And we did something similar. We called it Learn with Parka. And every other week, sometimes every single week, myself and another individual from our team would sit down and we would just share bite-sized 2 to 3 minutes of information for our audience that was relevant. So digital marketing tips for the staffing industry. So when I see companies doing that, that is amazing, because what it's doing is it's giving those little insights into, oh, wow, that person gets it. Like they get what I'm going through right now. And so for Jennifer, it gives her and anyone, if they're listening, it gives you that opportunity to do a shout out, right? Let's say you sit at an association or you're familiar with an association, right? You're following a group. I sat with the American Staffing Association on their Women in Leadership Council, and I would get an email once a month or more frequently of here are the different things that are going on. Here's a webinar coming up. Here's a book launch of one of the members, different things. So I hopped on camera and recapped them. Right. So sharing what's going on in your space, again, it doesn't always have to be an original thought that no one else has thought about. Part of it is being that curator and that microphone for some really cool things that are happening. So in that scenario, it was literally like I put a Post-it note on a tripod with my iPhone right above it and just read like, this event is coming up on this date. This is why it's cool. I will be there. You should totally check it out. This is a really cool webinar happening. Like something like that can be really, I hate to say simple because nothing is simple in owner-led sales. You're wearing a million hats, but something like that you could probably do twice a week, right? You're scrolling on LinkedIn and you're like, oh, that's a cool event. Awesome. I'm going to rally behind it and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. I remember when Jennifer started Authentic Brand, and it was amazing to see how she essentially documented the journey of her organization all the way through to what it is today. And what's cool is you can literally go back. If you're a female founder just getting started, you definitely want to follow Jennifer today.
Absolutely.
But, all the fears and anxiety that comes with being owner-led, to your point, I actually really like that term, owner-led sales. So I'm going to steal that from you.
Please, go ahead.
You get to go back and see what it was like at the time. So you know what to expect and what to come, and you can do what you need to do with confidence. I don't know if that was Jennifer's intention when she started doing that, but it's definitely the outcome, right? She's blazed a trail for a lot of young female founders that I think really benefit from her telling her story from start to finish. So I think that's awesome.
I think so too. And it's to give another example, if you're sitting there going, man, I can't really tout all the clients I'm working with right now, and I don't want it to come off so promote-y. Like I don't want it to be like, please look at me, my product or my service is amazing. Something that you can do is host fireside chats. So this is something that I've done in the past, and it really originated out of this mindset of I'd be sitting and having a conversation with a client, a prospective client, a peer in the industry that was non-competitive, and going, man, I'm learning from you. This is so cool. And I really wish someone else could hear this. So the very first person that I ever reached out to was a longtime client. And I just said, would you mind if I recorded our Zoom call and posted it? Like, I'm not going to gate it. So in, marketing terms, I'm not going to hide it behind a form. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I want this to be available. I just want someone to be able to jump out and see it. So what I did is I started hosting once a month fireside chats where I would go and I would find someone very similar to a podcast. And I would just say, this is what I understand of your area of expertise. Let's just have a call to talk through what would you be comfortable sharing? And we kind of made a game plan. I wrote up some bullet points, and then we hopped on a Zoom call and recorded it, and then I shared it. But that does some cool things too, because it gets you into conversations you might not otherwise have the opportunity to. Because if you're asking someone to share about themselves, it's no longer a sales pitch conversation, as long as your intent truly is to network with them. And if they find your services valuable, great. And if not, that is fine. You're giving them a platform to elevate, you're giving yourself a platform to elevate, and you're educating your audience. And so for me, that grew from individual fireside chats to I started getting asked to be on podcasts and webinars. And I started, going for conference speaking, and my schedule started filling up. And I was at that time in a VP of sales role and acting very similarly to an owner-led sales approach, right? So sales team of one, representing the brand, leading the sale. Not as the owner, but having been close knit to the foundation of the ownership for the past, at that point, about 10 years. And so when my calendar started filling up, I gave myself kind of that permission after a slight panic moment of I can't do one of these a month anymore. I realized, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to do one a quarter, and I'm going to turn it into a panel. And it was so cool because it was almost like when people watch these, it was like they were sitting down at a conference, watching a 4 to 5 person panel discuss a topic, and we'd tease it in advance, and then they'd get to hear it. And there'd be a lot of really great interaction in the comments. But what it also did is it would elevate the individuals that I was hosting on the Fireside Chat. Some of these folks were in C-suite roles and had not grown their personal brand, but had been thinking about, how do I start this? Mm-hmm. And so it was cool to be able to give them a platform that they didn't have to create themselves, but their companies were thrilled to share it. They were thrilled to share it. So just some ideas, and it doesn't have to be over manufactured, right? It can literally be recording Zoom and posting it to LinkedIn. There's a lot of fun, fancy things you can do to it after, but you don't have to.
Got it.
I know there's a lot of ways to get out there, and it doesn't always have to be blank screen. What is the smartest thought I can think of right now? It can be taking advantage in a positive way, like being mindful about the conversations you are already having day to day that are impactful to you and that resonate with you.
That's awesome, Kelli. Thank you so much for the time and for, again, these actionable tips that leaders can take today and start implementing with or without the help of their marketing team, right? I think this is a really good segue into the last question of our discussion here. And I'm actually going to link to the post that you did about some books and some options for two reasons. One is showcasing the fact that an example of a post that can engage an audience that doesn't have to be overly engineered, but can really spark a really good conversation. That's one. But secondarily, there are some really good books. Like we usually say, well, what are a book or two that you would recommend? But there were so many good books and conversations that I think our audience should jump in and go look at as well and be a part of that conversation. So I will do both. But
perfect.
In the spirit of our closing segment here, what is a book or two that you would recommend to an audience?
Yes. So when we were chatting about this in our prep conversation, you would let me know that you were going to ask me the book question. And I always fall back on one that's an oldie but goodie, which is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. The concept here is not necessarily that you actually are trying to get a 40-hour workweek into a 4-hour workweek. The premise that I like is putting emphasis on the things that are going to drive the most impact. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I have to continually remind myself of. It's really nice. I've got the creative side of my brain that likes to ideate, but the very structured and organized side that likes to project manage through initiatives. And there's something really rewarding about checking off a box that doesn't take as much time as the big project. And that isn't always the most impactful and most important thing to work on. So that is one that I like. I will call out one of the responses that I got from Zach Holloway in my LinkedIn post that you're going to link to. He mentioned a book that I am not familiar with called Give and Take by Adam Grant. And he said it was fascinating because it's all around what it takes to build and foster genuine relationships in business and in work. So that stood out to me. I did go out to my network and say, what do you guys think? Like, what are some of your favorite books that I should be looking at? And I won't tease the rest, but I had some really good responses. Lauren B. Jones, who I mentioned before, is an avid reader. Chris Ohlendorf, one of the founders of Receipt, who I worked with for years, is an avid reader. These are both like one book a week kind of folks, which is impressive to me. I don't even understand. So they shared some of their favorites as well.
Awesome. Kelli, thank you so much for joining me. And we'll definitely have to have you back on in a future date.
Great. Thank you for having me. Hopefully this was insightful to folks. It's all the things that I've learned along the way, and I'm certainly still learning as I go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.